All right. So let's start by looking at this drawing that we have. So we've got a system drawing here. If you've worked with any of your application engineers, this might look familiar to you. We have a lot of these we use for different scenarios. But what we've got here is building a room system, a meeting room using an NV-32 as a core. You can see we've got a couple of HDMI inputs going into that NV-32, a rack PC and a immersive there. We're using an IO USB bridge for some audio and video bridging, along with some keyboard and mouse extension, it looks like. We're using one of our Gen 2 touch panels in this design, as well as one of our PTZ cameras. And then we're going analog out of our NV-32 to one of our SPA amplifiers to drive some of our AD series speakers. So kind of a typical conference room, I would say. Fairly common to see something like this, single output, camera on the wall type of thing. So if you're unfamiliar with our NV-32, it is a very powerful box. We joke a lot about how we could spend hours and hours talking about the flexibility of this box. One of the neat things that came from the creation of this box was realizing it was powerful enough to be a core on its own and stand alone as its own processor, in addition to using some of the video and bridging functions that are built in. It can also be used as a network encoder or decoder, but we won't go too much into that because we could spend hours and hours just talking about that. So whenever you start a file, we do have this base file here that we're working from. When you bring one in, or when you start a file and you want to make it an NV-32, as a core, you would do it the same way you would treat any of our other cores. Over in the properties, over here on the right, you have the ability to change the model of the core that you're using in your file. Very useful tool, obviously, very quick and easy. If you need to switch, or maybe you picked a different processor, it's very easy to do. I actually was playing with one of my NV-32s the other day, and I took a core capable NV-32 and turned it into a peripheral, and all I had to do was switch the property here to my Core Nano and then drop in the block as an inventory item versus running as a core. So it's real easy to flip in and out of using this as a core or dropping one in as a peripheral, but it will look the same. A lot of the features will look the same regardless of how you use it. Most of the features are identical regardless of how you're using it. But today we'll be talking about it as a core, and this is kind of the guts of the block here. So whenever you have a core NV-32, you're going to have some blocks that need to be wired to it in order to use the pins on here. So as you notice, we've got a media cast pin, this first input on this block. That pin is used to receive a camera stream from one of our cameras. If for whatever reason you want to output the camera from a room out the HDMI of the NV-32, the NV-32 can receive that as a stream. And one of the cool things is it can receive as many as you could potentially have in a file. So if you've got 5 cameras and you want each of them to be available as a source, we can change it in the properties over here. Just below that, we see the 3 HDMI inputs. So those represent the physical inputs on the NV-32. Same with the output side. We've got an HDMI output here with some audio pins, so we can strip out the audio that's coming out. If you're using the NV-32 and you want to use dual outputs on it, you can do that, but you have to turn that on over here in the properties. You can see it by default. We just have HDMI 1 as an output. We can select 2 on the outputs. You lose the ability to do 4K if you're running in a dual output mode, but you do get 1080. Right. So the core is capable, when the NV-32 as a core is capable of using the same network streams as any of our other cores. You can route software-based Dante through these guys. You could use AES67. Any of those flavors are available to you. Dante is not included with the core. You do have to buy it as a separate license because we don't know how you're going to use the NV-32 when you buy it. So if you do intend on using Dante, you have to buy a license for that. What we can do in this file, though, I think the completed file, if anybody's looking at that, shows this as a Dante stream. I'm going to use AES 67 to be different, but you can see we can bring that in here to our file. It looks like we've got a little snake here that we have for our audio, and we can drive that over to our AEC block. Next thing I'll talk about here is the VoIP. This is one of our only cores that only has a single VoIP instance, but if you do want to do VoIP, it can do it. You can bring in a soft phone in your inventory here, and then add that. It looks like it was actually already in the file here. I didn't need to add it, but it can be added to the file like this, and your core, just like any of our other cores, can run that soft phone, that VoIP instance. So I'm just adding these, going down my list here. As you can see, our next one is we're gonna talk about here is our USB. So the USB has some different functions. You have to enable the USB bridging function over here in the properties. It looks like in this exercise file, somebody had already done that, or maybe I did that while I was poking around before we started. But you do have to enable it. It will come, everything will be disabled over here on the side, so you'll have to turn that on. You can see you've got some different options here for audio. If you notice right now, we've got speakerphone in and out, and we have sound card in and out. So your computer can recognize through the USB software that uses a speakerphone function versus a sound card function. And the nice thing about the sound card function is you can break out your audio channels if you need to do that. So you actually can have separate streams of audio. And then I believe you can adjust, where is it over here? We were just talking about this in our webinar last week. You can adjust the number of outputs here for the audio. Where was it? I think we go down here. You might not be able to on the NV-32. There we go, making a liar of myself again. This might not be able to break it out more than 2 channels, but you have the option there to break that out. So we can use the speakerphone. So the speakerphone function is going to be for a Zoom call like this, or potentially a Teams call, something along those lines. And you get some of this data here from your PC when you plug in. So we've got an active and a connected LED here, which indicate a connection being made, as well as being actively connected to a call. So you can use these LEDs that are built into this block here. They're logic driven. So whenever I have an LED, that means I have a logic high. I can use that to drive things in my system, automatically unmuting of things or showing pages on touch panels, things like that. So it's highly useful to utilize those functions. And you can go into your properties over here and expose pins like active and connected, and you'll get those logic highs and logic lows accordingly. Tyler asked, did you just use a shorthand command to add a snake? I kind of did, yes. I'll show you that again. So if you highlight the pins that you want to build a snake, when I pull this out, you can see my lines are connected. I hit the space bar and I get a snake attached to it like that, and then I'm ready to connect those. And just because I don't like that one is green and one is blue, I'll make them both green. I'm more of a flag guy. I don't use the snake very often, but it is very useful for keeping your file tidy. The AES 67 is for a microphone. We're simulating the creation of a conference room. So you could use a Dante block here. This isn't a live file. We're not pushing this to a core or anything. So this could be Dante. This could be anything you want it to be. You could drop in one of our microphones if you wanted to. Actually, I don't know if those are on 9.6. I think they're 9.7. Yeah. So they're yeah. So that's all that's for. Let's see. We've also got our IO USB bridge here, which is another peripheral device that we have. It's got a USB port on it and some other ports, RS-232s on it. this is a way to expand out of your system to a peripheral if you just need a USB extension. You know, a lot of folks use the USB on the NV-32. One of the new things that we're releasing in 9.7 is the ability to use our Core Nano as a peripheral and our Core 8 Flex as a peripheral. So you actually have USB bridging on those devices as well. So we're just expanding that even more. Additionally, our new touch panels have USB bridging on them as well. They have a USB-C port on the back. So lots of flexibility with on-ramping USB devices, host devices to drive meetings. One of the things I remember, a realization I had with the NV-32 was that USB host on the NV-32, regardless of if you're using it as a core or as an encoder or a decoder, that host port is hot. So if you got a customer, you're using some NV-32s in your system and they want to add another PC or another place to hook up to host the meeting, any of those host ports on any of your peripheral devices are an on-ramp for audio, which I think is just such a cool thing. An awesome tool for the UC world that we live in these days. All right, so we're bringing in the USB bridge. You can see this looks fairly similar to the USB host of the NV-32. You've got a few other pieces of information here that I think you can get through like robust mode in the NV-32 status block if we pull that out. But anyways, this is your IO USB bridge, which we are using in this system as a secondary USB on-ramp for the room. Now we've got our audio coming in. You can see we've got our microphone here, we've got our VoIP here, we have a input here that's to our core, our NV-32 is a core, and then our input here from the bridge, the IO USB bridge coming in, hitting our matrix here, and then we've got to take all of the things out that we need to go out in the system. So our speakerphone here from our NV-32, and then we also have a speakerphone here for our IO USB bridge, which we can connect to these flags that somebody has kindly put here for me to use. Our VoIP, we will pull from our soft phone block here, which is our output for our VoIP system, and we'll connect our flag on this side. Right, and then our output. So I guess I didn't talk about our output here. So we do have a 2-channel output on the NV-32. So it's a stereo mini connector, but as you can see, the software sees it as 2 separate channels of audio. So it's an unbalanced audio output. Same with the input side, which we're not using, I don't think, in this system. Let me double check here, because I would think with our system the way we have it, we would be using the audio extraction from our NV-32. But let me confirm that here. We're not going to actually use that analog input at all, I don't believe. Yep. So we do have the audio input. I'll just pull it out here to show it to you. As I mentioned, the same as the output. It's a stereo mini connector, but it's viewed as 2 separate channels of audio in the software. So you could legitimately bring in 2 separate inputs and take out 2 separate outputs with the NV-32. You just got to make sure you wire it correctly. Are you copy and pasting tags to complete links? Yes, I am. I am a copy and paste fan. As you can see, I'm just clicking on the flag, hitting Control-C and Control-V. That's all I'm doing. Another way you can pull those flags up is if you click on the node and hit the space bar, it will give you every option in the file that can be wired to that pin. So I could find it that way too. If I wanted out one to be that one, I just double click it there and I can delete it. I can have it go out both. Let's reference our drawing. I don't know if I'm supposed to use both outputs. Input 1 only, nope. So we're just using output 1, and that completes our audio chain. And then obviously we need to go in and make sure our matrix is right. I'm going to assume it's right for the sake of not wasting time doing that, but you got to make sure when you bring in a matrix mixer and are using it in this way, it does not come with anything routed by default. You'll have to go in there and do that. All right. Can you type, sorry, I'm trying to look at some pictures here. Where's the flag to connect for the stereo parametric EQ? We have not gotten to that yet. That will come off our HDMI block. So this block here, we'll just bring it out. So this is our HDMI IO from our core itself. We'll bring this guy out and we'll dump it right here in this section that says HDMI switching. Since we only have a single HDMI output, I'm going to change that property back in my settings. You may not have changed that whenever I did. So one of the things you noticed when I opened this block earlier, when I first started talking about it, you see display not wired. This is looking for some sort of feedback. So there's another couple of blocks that we have to use when we're using the NV-32. As you can see over here, they've already been added to my inventory, but these are generic AV sources. And then up here, you can see we have a generic HDMI display. These are inventory items, which get added by clicking your plus sign here, going down to video, and they exist right here. So if you have a bunch of displays, you're gonna have to, click this however many times. The nice thing about these two blocks in particular is because they don't physically represent a piece of hardware. I mean, they do, but not a Q-SYS piece of hardware. You can actually copy and paste them. So if I bring out my laptop source here, immersive, from my inventory, and I decide I have a second immersive in my system, I can copy and paste that and it adds it to my inventory. So a neat little trick. You can't do that with any of our other pieces of hardware. They don't work, or with our pieces of hardware, other blocks that come out of the inventory item, but you can do it with these blocks here. A neat trick to do things quickly. So we can tie these in directly to our HDMI switcher block here, and then we'll take our HDMI display block over here on the output side and tie that in. And now what we'll see is when I open this block, now I have some options. I'm actually able to physically press some routes to route what goes to this output here. And so to answer the question about audio, this last audio channel left and right, that is coming off this block down here, the HDMI IO, which is representative of the HDMI inputs on the NV-32. So I'm just going to copy those to these nodes here. You can come into the block itself and you can adjust the number of audio pins here. This is a really handy way to always have your audio following your video source, because whatever is going to output 1, which is only going to be one of the 3 inputs on this block, this audio will always follow. So a really easy way to make sure your audio is doing what you want it to do with the video. You also have something else I'll show with the HDMI talking about audio is we can inject audio to our HDMI display. So for instance, I had a system I worked on and they wanted paging throughout the building, but there were rooms that only had NV-32s in them, and they're thinking, oh man, now we got to add speakers and zones because we want to do paging. But no, you have the ability to expose some audio input pins on this display, and now I can inject whatever audio I want to go to this display, and it acts as an audio output from this system into the TV and then out the TV speaker. So a cool little thing there if you are in need of doing that. Built-in audio injection. We also have the ability to turn CEC on this block, which gives you some basic CEC controls, which are very useful for most TVs these days that have CEC. In here, you'll notice that the other tab in this display block is information about the display you're connected to, some other information for idle times and automatic sleep for the displays. You also can set your EDIT in here. All right. Mike asked, does it mix with the embedded audio? I'm not sure I understand that question. Whatever audio you send to that block, it can get a mix. So I can create whatever mix I want in this file and blast it out to that display. And that's why I say something like paging was a simple one because that's what we used it for. But it could be anything. We could route any of the audio out to a display that way and inject it embedded into that output. The other thing I'll mention here on the input side is our source block. So we've got a source block for our laptop and then one for the immersive in the system. Again, we get some information from the source that's connected to this NV-32. We get some LEDs here, which are useful for again, driving some logic. Our 5-volt detect is huge, valid format detect is huge. We also have the ability to set our EDID with the display on the front end side. We can adjust the output or the allowed resolution. And depending on how you're using this, you might want to do that on the front end and force 1080 if you're not using 4K, or knowing that you're going to use 2 outputs. If you're running in 1080, you can set that here so you're not worried about trying to change the scale later. You can just force everything down to 1080. Obviously, you have some other options here, hot plug trigger button and enable output. You'll get some feedback from the audio as well. So I think if you bump this audio channel up to 8 here in the properties, you'll see now I get 8 channels of audio if you need that and you want to break that out, which you can do here in the pins, and you can adjust that. So lots of options to adjust your audio, control your audio, and manipulate the video alongside that. Let's see. I think the one thing I forgot here was a room PC. Oh no, it's down here. I just moved past it. So we've got a room PC in this system as well. Add that guy in. All right. We'll jump into the camera section now. So in this system, I think we just had a single camera, but we have 2 different bridges. So we'll have to use a few different tools here. So in our inventory, we can see the camera that's been added to the system design. My camera is going to go here. We'll just call this camera 1 on the flag. And then something that we have, a tool that we use whenever we're using multiple host devices or multiple cameras, is our MediaCast router. So I can go in here to our schematic elements. I can search in my components here in the search field for MediaCast router. Fastest way to find something is search for it. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself crazy looking for everything. Some of these obviously are smaller groups, but you start looking for that specific thing might take you a while. So easier to do a search. But what we've got is a single camera going to 2 USB host devices. So we need 1 input and 2 output on this MediaCast router. We can take this flag that I made on my camera, connect it over here to the MediaCast router, and now we have that as an option. And then on the output side, we need to go into our bridge and find our USB video bridge, which is right here. And then in our core, we also have our USB video bridge. So now whichever machine is hooked up or chosen as the PC to drive the meeting, both of them will get the camera route there from the MediaCast router. And this could work if you have multiple cameras. You could have more host devices. I believe you can do up to 50 host devices in one system, which is absolutely insane that you could do that. But I'd sell that system and I'll buy you the steak. That would be awesome to do. It'd be a lot of fun to see that in action. But I think we can run 250 cameras and up to 50 host devices on one system. But that would just expand with this MediaCast router. And I mentioned earlier the MediaCast input on the NV-32. I can actually take this flag, this camera flag, and bring it down here to my NV-32 just to show, hey, if I want that to be a routable source in my room, I can do that here with that MediaCast input button. I can also take the output here of my router, my MediaCast router, and I can bring that down here to the NV-32, and then if I had multiple cameras or I wanted to be able to route to and from this, I could do that. I don't know necessarily why you would need to do that, but you could. Definitely had enough people asking to do camera out the NV-32 clearly as to why we added that as a feature, but it is useful. All right. So now we have the MediaCast buttons here can be used for our routing, and I'll show one other trick here with the MediaCast routers. In our properties, we have this option for image buttons. When this is set to no, you just get buttons here. When you set it to yes, these buttons become a preview of the camera. Now, this is a bit wonky. You wouldn't put this on a touch panel because it's 1 in 2 out, if where this would be useful if you have 2 in 1 out maybe, or 2 in 2 out, something like that. But you could use these and it would preview this. This would just preview the same camera twice. But you have the option to turn that setting on in the MediaCast properties if you want to have a preview on your button for the routing. You can also drag the video stream right out of the bridge block and use that on the touch panel for preview as well. All right, so we've got our camera added, we've got our USB bridging added. This is bugging me, having a flag on one side and lines on the other, so I'm going to delete that. Do it however you like. Let's see. What are we missing here? We've got some basic stuff here. I don't believe there's a adding of a user interface. Oh, there is. Cool. So on the user interface, we can map some buttons here. As you can see, we've already kind of got a starting point. But with what we've put together in about, I don't know, 25 minutes or so, obviously the audio piece was already here. The nice thing is I can take this audio, save it as a user component, and then come build around it for a basic conference room. And all I need to do is highlight these blocks and drag them down here to user component. And then I can say conference room, let's call it 1 display. I'll do audio here. And now if I want to recreate this room, I can come down here to this user component and drag it in. And now I'm back where I started. I mean, short of the cleaning up here, these little sections that were pre-built, I mean, you can save those too in a user component if you want. But in terms of the audio piece, I mean, that's everything the NV-32 is going to give you, and a little bit more because we have some more components in here. But essentially, now all I would have to do is add those same things, and I could build this out all over again pretty quickly. The idea here is just showing really how simple it is to put this together. So let's add some of these buttons to our touch panel. I will actually go side by side here with my view. So if you didn't catch how I did that, I'll open it again in my user interface with both tabs connected. If you grab one of these tabs and drag down, I'm still holding onto my mouse here. I get this crosshair in the middle, and I can snap my window to anywhere on this in the software here. So I'm going to snap it to the bottom just so I can see it, and then we can remap our buttons. So we know HDMI 1 is our laptop. Let's bring that over. So I can remap that button. And the way I do that is I drag out the button from the HDMI block here. I bring it onto the panel. I can drag it straight on. I don't have to bring it on the panel, but I can hover over the button. I'm still holding onto my mouse key, but before I let go, I hit Control. And you'll notice I get this pop up here. Let me zoom in a little bit and do that again. Kind of small there. So if I hover over the button I want to drop this button on and I hold Control, it says settings will be assigned to this control. So I'm still holding on to my mouse key, and you can see my cursor there. And when I let go of Control and mouse key together, it took too long, I get this secondary menu here where I can remap control of this button to whatever I've dropped on top of it, or I can transfer the style of whatever I started with on top of this new button. So I want to remap control, and now this PC button is true of HDMI 2, but I think that's the wrong one, right? Yeah, HDMI 2 is actually my immersive. So we'll remap the immersive button here, and then we'll take HDMI 3, which is our room PC, and we'll remap that. And now those buttons are the switching buttons here on our NV-32 block. Let's jump back to this. Zoom out a little bit. So our audio is already laid out for us here. Let's get some in-call confirmation. Sorry, I'm just looking through what we've got here. So here's our VoIP page where we have not got anything associated with it, and then we've got our VTC page, which is going to be a camera control, USB connect. So we've got some logic we need to add to this here. So let me jump back to mic control. Let's see, how do we want to do mic control? I want to see what that button's tied to. If you hit Control F and click on a button, you can actually track down what that button is mapped to. So we see jump to source of control. I've got the mic selected here. It will actually snap me back. So we're using the output mute of the auto mixer here, which is a good place to mute. I see this flag here. So we can actually use this mic mute to drive some different logic. So one of the other blocks that I haven't talked about that's part of your core or your IO USB bridge is our HID conferencing block, which I will bring both in. They look the same. They operate the same. They just are indicative of two different pieces of hardware. So what we've got here is some data that actually comes from your soft conferencing software. So this would be true feedback from, say, Teams, for instance. If we're doing this for a Teams room, if I mute in Teams, I get a mute here in the software. So I can actually tie my muting in my system to the muting with Teams, indicating when I'm muted, when I'm not, with the Teams and visibly in Teams, which anybody who's used Teams or Zoom knows they can see when somebody else is muted or not muted. That's a useful thing. So we can actually drive the mute from our software here. So what I'll do is I'm actually just going to expose the phone mute in our control pins for these two HID conferencing blocks. And our mic mute, since this is already the button on our panel, I'm just going to leave it. I'm going to take this mic mute flag and I'm going to send it over here to the HID conferencing block so that now when I hit the mute button on the touch panel, it mutes in the HID conferencing block, which is connected to my Teams call. Pretty slick way to add some really useful information for the user. It looks like we also have this privacy mute over here, which I'm imagining could be tied to the output of this conferencing block. Let me look through my notes here just a second. That could be used for a number of things. I know sometimes I've seen privacy mutes used for muting video and audio, which you could do in your camera block here. You can track down the private setting. Let me see if I can find it here. With blocks that have a ton of controls like this one, for instance, the camera controls there's just a lot of stuff here. It's easy to not know which pins you want whenever you want to connect some pins for some logic. If you go into emulation mode, I hit F6. You can also go up here to File and Emulate. If you go into emulation mode, you can actually hover over these buttons and it tells you with this little pop-up comment box that pops up exactly what that block would be called when I go look in my properties. So I was actually looking for this privacy, talking about being able to flip privacy on the camera. So this is pan, tilt, zoom privacy mode. If I hit F7, I'm going to take myself back out of emulation mode. I can go over here now. I go to pan, tilt, zoom, and then privacy mode. Now that pin is exposed here. And whenever I send a logic high to this block, it will trigger that privacy of the camera. I'm going to do that. You don't have to do that. I could see where customers may not want that. I'm just using it for the sake of showing you that it's an option. I've definitely used it before, and I've definitely taken it off when people didn't want it before. But we'll tie that privacy mute into our HID conference so that we get a mute all the way through our system now. All right. So we've got the mic muting happening now. Let's jump into mapping some of our buttons here. Let's do the audio conference page because that's an easy one to map some buttons. So as we can see, we've got a control interface here for our soft phone. These buttons are indeterminate. They don't know what they're assigned to. They don't know what they're supposed to be controlling. They don't know what they're supposed to do. So the easiest way to do this is kind of like I did before. We come over here, we go, oh, where's my soft conference here? Oh, you know what? I don't even have it pulled out yet. I got to bring it out. And then I got to map all these buttons. So I could drag this one at a time over and hover and click and drop, and you can see, okay, now that's assigned. Or we have another tool called the remap tool. So I'm actually going to highlight this stuff here. We can go in here to remap UCI. When I do this, I like to group by my page. We teach heavily to use layers instead of pages. As you can see here, just by sorting by page and layer name, I immediately have the one page that's in our design here, and then all my layers that are associated with it. It's way easier to look at. I know I want to go to the ATC page. I've got this soft phone that doesn't know who it belongs to. And if I come in here and click my soft phone selection right here at the top, that should remap those. And did I select the wrong one? Let's see. Main, ATC. Oh, there we go. I did select the wrong thing. So I'll come down here and find my VoIP soft phone control block. Now we can see all those flags disappeared. If I come down here and click OK, all of those buttons have been remapped to that block. So a really quick way to do that. I find that there's times where it's useful to do that, and other times where it's a little easier. If you just got one or two buttons, it's easier to just drag and drop them. But the VoIP is a great use of that. Another good use of that can be the camera control. So we've got this camera control here. We've only got one camera. We can come over here and do the same thing, drag and drop each button, or we can go into our remap tool, find our camera page here under VTC, and we want to find our camera in here, right there. And looks like one of them is missing. That should be okay. Yep, there it goes. I don't think that I have an issue now. I do have one more here that's looking, somebody's looking for a home. Let's find it. Who's looking? Oh, here we go. This is our wireless presentation information. So I hadn't talked about this yet. Let me back up a second, but we won't be able to assign those anyways. So one of our plugins that we've got, do we have a place for it here? Doesn't look like we do. I'll add it to my control block here. So one way to get plugin is to come up here to the top of your screen and click the puzzle piece. You can also click down here on the right under your schematic elements, the puzzle piece, and you can pull down any of our plugins from an asset manager. Now we're using Immersive. As you can see, I already have it installed, so I don't have to install it again. But if you didn't have it installed, you would see just install here. You can click it. It takes about 10 seconds and it installs and you're good to go. And once it says remove underneath, you know that it's in there. So we can jump back here to our schematic page and we can drop in Immersive. Here it is. One thing I'll note is when you're doing a search, the plugins are kind of oddballs. They don't search this folder that everything rolls up to. It actually searches for the name of the plugin. So if I came in here and typed Immersive, nothing comes up. But if I type Solstice, you can see it comes up here. So just something to be aware of when you're searching for those things. Knowing the name of the plugin is important. Luckily, the plugins are pretty easy to navigate through, but just something to note if you're searching for it. But so this is our Immersive plugin. So assuming this Immersive is on the same network as our core, we can pull some of this, or the core has access to the network that the Immersive is on. We can pull some of this data down and then populate it according to the actual configuration of the box itself. I can take the session key and the pod IP, which is what is on our panel. I'm just hitting copy, and then I'm going to go over here to this page and paste. I guess I don't need the text field, but I can take my two fields here. I can remap this guy, I can remap this one here, and now those will populate the information for the wireless presentation. All right. We jump back to our schematic page. Now that's done. All right. We talked about the audio pins on the output of the HDMI block from the NV-32. We also have plug-in for displays. If you're used to controlling displays, maybe not through CEC. I know I mentioned that earlier. We have some different display plugins. There's a Samsung, there's LG, there's Panasonic, NEC's in here. We've got a slew of different video options for or plugins for video options here. But you could bring one in, say you were using an NEC display. I've already got that one installed. We can come down here to our plugins and find the NEC plugin. And you have some options here where you can drive your power or change inputs or adjust volume if you're using the volume on the display. I know in this room we've got some speakers, but here's kind of a look at that plugin. It looks just like an NEC remote. For anybody who's ever seen an NEC remote, they've looked like that for many years. I have an NEC at home that I wish I had a remote for, because it would be useful, because the buttons on the display are not labeled and I can never keep track whenever I need to switch something on the display itself if I'm doing that. But that's kind of a look at one of the plugins. They all kind of look similar to that. If you drag it in a different manufacturer, they're in there. They will look similar. You're going to get kind of a look of a remote with some other options. So let's see. We can drive some logic here. So one of the things I want to show is a way to use logic. For instance, the pod IP and session key here. There's a particular time we may want this to show on our touch panel. How about when we're on the presentation page and we've selected wireless presentation? That might be a good time to show that information, right? We can actually come here to our NV-32 and we can monitor which source is selected by going into our properties and exposing our selected pins here. So we know HDMI 2 is our immersive. So we can go here and say source immersive. What is that? What is that going to? Looks like there might be a flag in here for it already. Let's play figure out where that goes. Oh, we've got it in our power here. This guy is coming up here. Oh, okay. So what we've got here for presentation, I didn't even realize this block was in here. What we've got here for presentation is we're monitoring when the page that's selected on our UCI, we can see here, this is our selector. So these are our navigation buttons on the left of our user interface here: presentation, video call, and telephone. And so we've got presentation, video call, and audio conferencing. So the when the way this wireless logic is working here, if we look at the user interface, we've got we want this text to pop up when something specific happens. So what we've got here is when the presentation button is selected, this F presentation, you can see we've got it driving this control function down here, and the source immersive is selected, which I just connected down here to the output of our NV-32. This gives us a logic high when this is true. So when output 1 is receiving HDMI 2, we get a logic high, which connects, I think it's in here, the source immersive, and we get 2 trues because we're on the presentation page and immersive is selected. This wireless flag comes up here to our UCI layer controller, which will drive that wireless presentation information page. This one right here is, or layer, I should say, not page, but layer. It will then show. we can go into emulation and see that. When I go to presentation, you can see it's not here, but if I select wireless, bam, there it is. Now I see that layer. So everything that's done in this UCI is done through layers, as you can see. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but that gives us a lot of flexibility in things like this, being able to show multiple layers at once, not having to be restricted to a page and layers within that page. But we can see I switch away from my room PC and that goes away. I go back and there it is again. So kind of a slick trick. You could use this with something I mentioned earlier in that HID conferencing block. We have the active and, or I'm sorry, that's in the speakerphone block. We have the active and connected pins that we can look at, which I will show these for both the USB host port on the NV-32 and on the IO USB bridge. Let me jump down here. Let's see where we've got that tied in. It's like we got a lot of off-hook sections here. So we've got a few different places we can tie in. So what we've got is we've got a layer built into our panel that comes down and says we're in a call. But we need to tie some of these flags in to make that logic work. So we've got a VoIP off-hook. Anybody guess where we put that? Don't everybody answer at once. It will be from the VoIP block. Let's see, where do we get that? Not DTMF, status, off hook. So in my VoIP status block, I have an off hook pin. So I can tie my flag. I just copied it from that other section down here. Tied the VoIP off hook to this. Core camera active. Okay, let's go tie that in. That's kind of a good one to know. So in your USB video bridge block, there is a call active. I believe it's right here. Active, USB active. So under, I've got both of these highlighted. Just another neat trick. If you're editing properties on multiple of the exact same block, you can go in and actually just highlight them. And actually you can do it with blocks that aren't identical. You just, you may not get all the properties if they're not exactly the same, but I can come in here because they're exactly the same. I can go into my status pin, I can expose USB and then click active. And now I got this status USB active and I just hit the space bar to view my options. So core camera active. Yep, that's the one we want right there. I don't know if I need to use that same one, USB core active. Yeah, separately. Yep, so this is the IO active, or IO USB camera active is right here. So I have a separate flag for that. Oh, you're saying this one is in the wrong place, aren't you? Okay, there we go. Then I have IO USB camera active. So now I'll get logic high on both of those. Keep moving down the list here. Core active, that's going to come off of this bridge here, which is an active. Wait, which one did I grab? 4. Yep, that's the right one. The bridge probably has its own down here. IO USB bridge active. And then we have core OH. What is core OH? Oh, off hook LED. Man, we're tracking everything. I love it. So in our HID conference block, we get an off hook LED here. What we're doing is we're essentially looking at every possible connection that could possibly tell us we're in a call, connected to a call, active on a call, in every way possible. And so I'm just tying all these in, and you notice all of these are going to, they're all going to this OR gate, then to this toggle button. So this toggle button is made with a custom control for a couple reasons. So this toggle button gives us the ability to physically toggle into a call if we want to test. Additionally, leaving it in the file the way we are it will track the logic of the system. So if all of these things go false, it will drive my toggle false. So essentially, if I load this file and accidentally leave this toggle button high, but when I load it, none of these things are a logic true, a Boolean of true. So it will drive this toggle button back low, but I can always come back and test it if I need to by just clicking that button. So a neat way to do that. But now all those logic pins are tied in. You have the ability to get that pop-up to work. We'll pop over here to the UCI. We can go in here, pretend to make a phone call to that trusty old 555 number. And you can see we get our call in progress here come down because we're now emulating a call. If we can disconnect, we can see it goes away. And to show you how that toggle button works, we can click that button, go back to the UCI and see it brings it down as well. So that's something we teach. We like using that because you can use it for a conference, a soft codec application. You can use it for VoIP. You can use it for multiple things. You can use it for all the things like we're doing here. So we're tracking all those together, lots of different functions, but you can see I'll leave this a logic high. I'll go offline. I'll re-emulate and it'll drive that toggle button back to a logic low because all of these statements are false going into this logic block. So even if I accidentally leave this on before I push the file, I don't have to worry about that in-call banner just living on the touch panel while the customer is using it, but it's there as a test tool. All right. So all done here. We got a couple more here, yeah, that aren't tied in. USB core connect. Oh, those are these connected pins. So to show us the USB connected page, we have some flags here we need to tie in. So the core connect is going to be this guy here, and then this guy here going to our IO USB bridge. So what that's giving us is another toggle button made from a custom control that's driving logic to show us the camera control when we are connected and to tell us to connect if you want to see the camera control when we are not connected. And I'll emulate and kind of show you what that looks like. And this will be probably easier if I split my screen here like this. So we can see right now we're getting two false statements here in this logic function because we don't have anything connected on the core. But I can come in here and trigger this button press here that then gives us a true. This is still going to show that nothing's connected here, but I do get a true because I've toggled this button. And we can follow this logic for our layers on the right side. So we have the and here is the VTC page. So what this is looking for is looking for us to be on the VTC page and to have USB connected in order for us to see the VTC visibility. So what that'll look like is if I go to the video call page, but I'm disconnected from USB, instead of seeing my camera control, I get, hey, you need to connect your computer or you're not going to be able to see the camera. If I go in and this is me plugging in my computer, look at that. Now I can see my camera controls. I can see my preview of the window and I'm good to go. So what I'm getting is I get a true down here when I'm disconnected from this position greater. And then I get a true and I get a false on the AND gate. But if I plug in, then I get a true on the AND gate and a false on this position greater. And it's just driving two different layers on this page. And again, the way that works, if I take this offline, I'm editing, okay, now I'm on site, I'm going to push this file. I've left that toggle button high. It's going to automatically untoggle itself because the incoming logic is not true. And now we see we have a pretty functional system here using just using some logic pins, using some logic blocks, all driven off of our NV-32 as a core. One of the things I didn't talk about was licensing. If you need a user interface or you need scripting, you do have to buy a license to use those on any of our cores. As I mentioned, you don't get Dante with the NV-32 as a core. you get you do have AES 67 out of the box, but if you want Dante, you got to pay for that separately. So that is just something to note. That kind of walks us through this. Happy to answer any questions if you have any questions. I hope everybody learned something as we went through this. I realize I don't have the questions up, but Steve's been answering, I think, diligently. I'm going to run through this to make sure I didn't miss anything. I thought I saw an open flag here. Oh, my power off here. Let's see. So we're using this this power off, or this flip flop as a power off here. Oh, my inspector. Yeah, that's a good idea, Steve. Thank you, sir. So we can come in here and we can see things that are ignored, we'll say, orphaned controls. So camera one here, oh, that one can go away because we're not using that. That's just our media cast. We can do that if we want that. I did see a power off here that wasn't tied to anything. Let me see what that goes to. All right. Oh, not tied to anything on this side. So you might use that power on, power off. Sometimes I'll use the power on to just drive my selector to a specific state. And it looks like instead of doing that with the on, we're doing that with the off here. But that would clear all your routes here on this page, for instance, because this selector is our navigation. I'll show you what that looks like whenever you hit power off. Uh-oh, what did I break? Configured for unicast. Okay. I can't tie this in without changing some settings. Let me delete that. And we'll try again. Here we go. So with this power on of this flip-flop, the not out state, if we reset, we can see it defaults back to this specific startup screen. And that's driven by this logic high of this selector that was driven high by the power being turned off with the reset button, which then shows us this page. But we can see I can go straight into presentation here. I'm on a wireless, I've got room, PC, laptop, and you can see I'm driving the navigation on this selector, flipping pages. Yeah. So I don't know, that power on is just not being used for anything right now. Might use that to drive a snapshot to set your audio levels whenever you start up the system, something like that. Lots of different options there. Let me read through some of these questions here as Steve is answering some. Very helpful, learned lots of capabilities. Thank you for joining, Joshua. Shelby, I missed the first part of the presentation. Will the recording be available? Yes, but you probably don't want to listen to me talk for much longer than you had to hear me. Let's see. Learned a lot, was way fast, hard to keep up. I apologize. Moving quickly through this. We want to cram a lot in here, so I do apologize. Bouncing around a little bit, moving quickly through it. We know this is a valuable class. We'll likely roll this again. One of the other things Steve and I were just talking about this morning was potentially doing a class. Now with 9.7 coming out, we have peripheral mode for the Core Nano, for the Core 8 Flex, and then we can also talk about some other devices with peripheral mode, just because the function's a little different, the setup's a little different, the way you configure it is very similar, but there's just some different things you have to do. So we might rope some more NV-32 conversation in when we do one of those, because the NV-32 being used as a peripheral functions a little differently. You wire it differently. You have to go into the GUI and change its mode as well. That's one thing I didn't talk about. For anybody still hanging in, I'll jump in and just kind of show what this looks like. If I go into my configurator here, I can pull up an NV-32. Just pull this one up, for instance, and in the status, or no, it's utilities, I can come in here. This NV-32 currently is set up as a peripheral, but if I need to use it as a core, I hit this drop down, select core, and then switch it over. So you do have to do that in order for it to function in that way. All right. For the anonymous attendee that said it was very fast, please reach out with questions. That's why we're here. Shoot us emails if you've got questions. It's just first.lastname@qsc.com. If you need our email, feel free to reach out to us. If we can't help, we can certainly get you to somebody who can. Happy to answer questions though as they arise. We like playing in this stuff. We like using our software. We like using our product. We have a blast with it. So we like answering questions whenever people have them, because we know that's how everybody's learning, is sharing their knowledge with each other. Steve, it looked like we had about 90 folks join us today. That was good. Glad we had some good attendance. Again, hoping everybody learned something. Doesn't look like we have any more questions coming in, so I will sign us off here. And if you guys need anything else from us, please reach out, and we'll be here for you. Until next time, everybody have a great week.